All right, I am so excited to about today's conversation, and let's get started. We're going to be talking about how we get rooted in wellness with Miss Elizabeth White. Hopefully, you all have seen her. If not, I will be sharing her Instagram viral video. But Elizabeth White is the owner of New Age Co-Living, and she is also an author. And we're so excited to be talking to her about what it means to age and all of the things involved in aging. Just a little bit about Elizabeth. She is a former C-suite executive, a retail owner, as well as a Harvard business grad. And she goes around the country speaking about issues around aging. And both Elizabeth and I are lucky enough to be founding board members for Aging While Black. So it's such a pleasure and a treat to talk to you, Elizabeth. How you doing today?
I'm good and delighted to be here with you.
That is wonderful. Now, what are you sipping on?
I am sipping on what is it? Mango ginger tea.
Oh, you're so healthy. Meanwhile, I have my oat milk with instant coffee. It's the afternoon. It's one of those kind of gloomy days here. Hmm. Anywho, well, why don't we just start about your book? What inspired you to write 55 Unemployed and Faking Normal? Like, that is quite the title.
So, in my mid 50s, so this was actually I'm 71 now, so some
Ooh.
years ago, right after the Great Recession, and I have all the props and credentials: Harvard MBA, John Hopkins. I'd worked at the World Bank. I lost my job.
Mm,
And because of that kind of background, I'll find another job. And it was really slow going.
mm,
And weeks turned into months. And, women, we talk. I'm talking to a good friend of mine. She's an Emmy Award winning producer. She's not finding work. Somebody else not finding work. And I wrote an essay describing what it's like to land here when you have done well all your life and suddenly you're in this situation. And then that went viral. So
ooh.
that essay, what happens is they'll do, when they're commenting, they do three comments, three sentences, but then they find your email address. And then you get, a single page of exactly what happened to them. And then people were in DC and they'd say, "Can we meet for a coffee?" And at some point I thought, there are a lot of books out there on retirement and the income crisis, but there
Mhm,
wasn't one written for you if you
mhm,
land here. Not what
mhm.
the legislator should do, not, kind of what Brookings Institute is talking about, but if what's the play if this happens to you? So I did first a self-published book, and then later on spoke with Simon and Schuster and was invited to do the book that you held up, because a lot
Oh,
of times self-published books, they libraries won't carry them because at that point they weren't getting sort of reviewed,
I
and
see.
my audience needed to be able to get the book for free in the library. So that started me on just talking all over the country to all kinds of adults who had landed here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. So you coined the term faking normal. What do you mean by faking normal? I have my own thoughts about this, but yeah.
So we live in a culture where you have to pretend you're doing okay when you're not doing okay.
Hmm.
So you have to, when you're out of work, you have to seem like, you have these projects, or you're in between jobs when you've been unemployed for 2 years. And so there's all this pretending. And it's very stressful to sort of keep that up and maintain it. And so, one of the things in my book is I talk about resilience circles. So, that's a place where you can gather with other people who are going through what you're going through to tell the truth about what's happened to you. Because what happens with the faking normal, when I was doing the research for the book and I'd be sitting across from someone, they'd actually be leaking emotion. They were so much upheaval
Wow.
what had happened. And I was thinking, if I met them, would I want them on my team? Would I want them, on my project? So in the book, the Resilience Circle was a place where you could tell the truth,
Mm.
not have to fake normal, so that when you did get that interview, you could go in from a grounded place.
So interesting. My situation was I just kind of towards the end of my time running the Atlanta Housing Authority, and I had gone to an event and said one of the big churches, and we probably had a couple of hundred, maybe a few hundred people there. It was a pretty big event. And a woman came up to me and she looked lovely, looked normal, and she whispered to me and she said, "Excuse me, I really need help finding housing." And I could see the energy shift, the shame that she was carrying. And it piqued my interest for two reasons. One, she clearly didn't look like what most people think of as needing assistance or needing support. She also clearly was suffering in silence. And it was just something that I was curious about how many people find themselves in their elder years not having the resources that they thought they would have, not having space to be honest about it. But also, you said you're 70 years old. 70 is like the new 50. It doesn't, aging does not look like whatever we thought it did. I promise you. And that means that we got to figure something else out because I thought I'd be in an old person's home right now. I don't know.
No, and I'm like this big age of 71, I'm wrapping my arms around it.
Mm,
I said to someone when I turned 70, I think that was my best year to date,
okay.
you know. And not because everything was perfect. It's not
Right.
that. It's more you have more resilience, or you can have more resilience to sort of meet challenges that are, coming up for you.
Mm,
So I want us to think of 70. I don't want sort of 70 to be 50. I want a
right.
better 70,
Right. That's right.
a better
That's right.
70.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. That's beautiful. Well, in this season of your life, you've created a new vision for New Age co-living. So tell us a little bit about New Age co-living and what inspired it.
So as I was going around talking to older adults, there were two things that would come up all the time. One was, I'm going to have to work forever,
Hmm.
and I'm losing my job in my mid 50s. I always say there's a reason that cashier at Trader Joe's is an older person. They're not always there because that's where they want to be. So the
Yeah.
whole thing of, workplace age discrimination, huge. And the other thing I was hearing about was housing. People were saying to me, if I have my housing, I can extreme coupon it the rest of the way.
Hmm.
That's, often the biggest expense. So, as you know, I have friends of all ages from 30 to
Hmm.
80. And what I find with my young friends is they know where the, new initiatives are, where the money is, who the rising stars are. And they're always telling me, Elizabeth, you should apply for this thing or the other. So I throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, and I applied for to be in a venture studio when I was like 69. And thinking, nothing to happen. And there were 4 rounds of interviews. And sort of at the third one, I thought maybe I should straighten out my tie here and pay attention. And I got invited to join. And I was one of 5
Mm,
entrepreneurs. I felt like Grandma Moses in there because I was twice the age of everybody else. And the challenge that they put in front of us
hmm.
was, what do you want to do? Everybody had a different background, something they could tell that we were passionate about. What is the big challenge in this thing that you've been working on that you'd like to address? And it was housing for me.
Hmm.
'Cause I kept hearing from people worried about the housing, and the housing being so fundamental to stability. And health and wellness, etc. And I started to see all in all the major cities these co-living, but for nomads, for a workforce, nothing really geared towards older adults. And I wondered, could that be a solution on the affordability front? We had been hearing a lot about aging and loneliness and isolation. Could this address that as well? And so that's what I told the studio that I wanted to work on.
Mm, that's beautiful. And what do you think are the biggest barriers to bringing co-living options to the market?
So I think so. There are the barriers that are related to I think older adults themselves of thinking about this as a solution, and that's something I've become now very interested in. The psychological and emotional barriers to a population that has lived alone for 50 years, 40 years. And then the idea of moving into a smaller space, um, a much smaller space, and what that means in terms of downsizing, what it means in terms of do you have a door you can shut or not, what it means
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how you get along with housemates if you've lived alone. So I think there's that piece. And I think we're still stuck in an idea about older adults that, they're sort of plus 55, there's assisted living, there's sort of
Right.
some
That's right. That's right. The categories:
categories. And
independent, nursing, assisted living,
right.
memory care.
Right, and this has been in place for a long time,
Mhm.
and so it's not thinking about that I might, in where I am, want workspace. Still at 70,
Yeah.
71, I still want to work. Or, I so the thinking is not yet outside of those categories which have been in place, forever now.
Mm. So, what would a wellness redesign look like? Given what you know now, for people who are aging in style, what do you think um, this could look like?
So, one thing that I would like to see us normalize complexity. Okay. And what I
Mm,
mean by that, especially, I'd love to see like a bold campaign that really talks. We were talking about women, midlife and late life women, that really talks about our real life experience. So,
mm,
something like the vagina monologues or the
mm,
moth, where we get to talk about reinvention. We get to
mm,
talk about, being empty nesters. We get to talk about grief. We get to talk about rage. We get to talk about sex. We get to talk about us, all our body shapes, all our races, every relationship status, that this shifts this sort of conversation and stereotypes that we have about older women. So, like
mm,
a bold storytelling campaign has to be, I think, the framing where women, older women, see themselves. We see it in ourselves and among our friends, but when we look at how we're often marketed to, it's, we don't even like recognize who they're talking about. So that would be
mm.
one, thing that I would love to see.
That is so fascinating. So you kind of hinted at it, but there is a new normal as you age. And can you tell us, for those of us who don't know what that means, because you hit on some things, all the body types, sex, does not go away as you age. Relationships can actually be just as rich, if not richer, as you age, and more fulfilling. What does the new normal look like?
No, so I think it's all of those things. And I think plus, I'm old enough to remember Leave It to Beaver, and there are people who know Father Knows Best and this sort of traditional nuclear family.
Hmm.
That's not the norm right now. There are
No.
more families that are living alone. So I think the biggest category are people living alone or couples without kids. So our
Mhm.
housing stock doesn't actually match kind of what our households are now. You
Yeah.
look at even multi-generational families, it's like 20% of households and not just immigrant families anymore.
Mhm.
So we've got we were talking about this earlier, zoning that is still for the nuclear family. And we have housing, all these 3-bedroom places in the suburbs. uh, I had a friend who the model that he was working on was to have women living together. He said I'd have to look at 100 houses to find two that would work because
Yep.
they all had a master bedroom, these
Yep.
two kiddie rooms,
Yep.
with a connecting bathroom, and
Yep.
he said if you put three, women in there,
Mm.
nobody wanted the kiddie room.
No.
And so we're not the information is there. I'd love to see more developers paying attention to kind of what's really happening uh,
Yeah.
in the society and the culture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that leads us to kind of the point on access and equity, because if it's not there for the masses, and in my mother's situation, she's in assisted living right now. It's a building of older white women. And a lot of that is because they have the incomes and the retirement savings to be able to move there. But let's talk about how this is impacting women of color, and particularly African American women, a little differently. Aging may be a different conversation, and your options may be different as you age.
No, so definitely around the income.
Mm-hmm.
We experience not only the issues around race, but the issues around gender. And when you look at actually at the wage gap, that costs Black women $1 million over a lifetime. So when
Mm-hmm.
you think about $1 million, that's college, that's investment in a house, that's sending kids to school, that's so many things, that's retirement savings.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you then, as an older Black woman, older brown woman,
Mm-hmm.
are in a position to afford, because here, when we think about when Social Security was enacted in 1935, life expectancy at birth was 70. So, you were thinking about now, if you make it to 60 in reasonably good health, you got 20 years.
Oof.
Back then, you might have had 5 years.
Mm.
So you can put together 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
20 years is really challenging, not only for brown and Black women, but for a lot of people, especially when the idea is that at 65 you retire. So you
Yeah.
got you got a lot of years at the end of the money.
Yep. Yep.
And this is what I think we have not come to grips with. So we have this longevity bonus of living longer, but we don't have the financial foundation yet to really support it. So people are worried about, like, how am I going to do this? I have people say to me all the time, I am facing a work for life proposition.
Yep.
There is no retirement.
Yep.
Not because I would not like to retire, but I'm not going to be able to afford it.
Yep. One of the articles that I love citing is a New York Times article that came out about how more and more people are now living alone. And they were talking about the fact that white women is one of those growing groups. And some of it is agreeing divorce, that women are getting divorced later in life and they're just saying, this is not how I want to live. And some of it is that women just naturally outlive men for whatever reason. One of the interesting statistics that they pointed out is that African Americans, more than Hispanic families, more than Asian families, are likely to live alone at every age and stage of our lives. So when you take into account the fact that African Americans tend not to our marriage rates are lower, we tend to live independently and in our own places. We don't culturally anymore, and I don't have a judgment around it other than I really do wish we had more multi-generational living, and it was more in our culture of taking care of ourselves. What that means is that when you get to retirement, coupled with the fact that you haven't earned as much as your peers, you don't have as much to give out, and particularly women, because you've not only earned less, but you've probably given more. to support your family. And so here you are, and you're just stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so, as I've been talking about these aging issues and what's happening on the other side of the housing pipeline, it feels so urgent to me for Black women in particular to be having this conversation and to be very upfront about what it means and what the limitations are.
Yes, and I think we are starting to have the conversation. And you and I were talking a little earlier about Exodus,
Yeah.
and which is a group of Black women, often, so it can be single by, as you said, divorce. It could be single by never married by choice or
Hmm.
circumstance, widow, or you can also be single and have adult children who are not in a position to help you. I can't
Hmm.
tell you how many women I know still helping adult children.
Right.
And so we are starting to gather ourselves and have these conversations. It would
Mm,
be nice if there was some infrastructure around it. One
mm,
of the things I like about, I spoke at the Exodus conference in September,
mm,
was a container for women to find each other, Black women to
mm,
find each other and have this conversation, to test, do I want to live someplace else? Do I want to travel someplace else? Do I want to live half the time here and there? Because we also need models.
yeah.
We need examples of, she did it. She's like me. I can talk to her. She's telling me how she prepared, what she had to do to live or work someplace else. And so we're starting to gather ourselves, because we're understanding, we all have, I think, in our sisterhood, our
Mhm,
friendship with other Black women, we're hearing about, so and so was doing really well and now she's not. All of us know somebody who, is now faking normal.
mm,
And we
mm,
see it in all kinds of ways. Suddenly they're ordering mineral water, and that's a Chardonnay girly right there. I've been
mm,
in cars with people where they're putting $7 of gas in their car.
mm.
I know people, you no longer
Ooh,
get invited to their home because they're worried that the carpet hasn't been cleaned or the bathroom sink is
mm,
not working. So we, in our friendship circles, sometimes in our family, are seeing the results of the equity issues that you're talking about.
ooh, so let's talk about it, the power of community,
Yeah,
because, I starting to see it in my friend group. The haves, the have-nots, the subtle shame. We don't talk about it. Sometimes we do. Um, but the power of community, of being able to have these spaces. So Exodus is one community that has started to pop up. Are there other bright spots that you've seen in the communities formation to talk about these issues or to start to create some togetherness?
there's one that I just saw starting a couple of months ago called, what's it called? The Golden Girls Gang.
Mm,
And this is a group, and this is where I saw the woman in her sort of, kind of opening salvo on TikTok. Just
mm,
saying, look, I'm alone. I don't have money. This has happened to me. I'm in my, mid late 50s. And the response that she got, and then women coming together. I've got land here, and
mm,
someone else saying I'm an architect. Somebody
mm,
else saying, there is, some cabins. Maybe a group of us could get together and buy those cabins and renovate them. So what you see is, in the absence of any sort of safety net, and in
mm-hmm.
fact, the safety net that was in place is now starting to get dismantled. That women are seeing, we got to make our path by walking
Yep,
because the cavalry is not coming.
that's
It
right.
ain't
Help is not on the way.
on, on the way. Mhm.
So, can you talk about quiet reinvention? Because a lot of this stuff does not happen loudly, it doesn't happen in front of the cameras, but there is a joy to being able to accept what is happening, find your community, and reposition yourself.
So I had this was shocking to me the other day. So I was working on my CV and I was working on it in Claude. Claude gentle nudged me and said, you know, your CV goes back 35, 40 years.
Hey, Claude.
So I'm saying, so, and what's wrong with that? And it said, no, 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 Elizabeth, no, no. So I said, so Claude, what am I supposed to do? And it said, you're going to put in a section called Early Career Highlights. I'd never seen that on a CV.
Hmm.
So I said, Claude, show me. What does that mean? Take my CV and use it.
Okay.
And it gave me two options. One option, which is the one I went with, reduced my those 20 years to three sentences. This was
Ooh.
a big gulp. They were gorgeous sentences, though. Gorgeous, full. And I thought I had to kind of, because I know that traveling I did 50 times to Africa, all this stuff. See your life reduced to three sentences.
Mm.
But it didn't matter in a way because the things that I'm want, because that's all my international World Bank,
Yeah.
UN, that is not what I'm doing now because we're
Mm.
talking about reinvention. What
Yeah.
I work on now is longevity,
Yep.
aging,
Yep.
women's equity, etc. So I could let go with that big gulp, okay, of 20 years reduced to three sentences.
Ooh.
And this because I've been an entrepreneur. That
Mm.
was a period. I've worked at the World Bank. That was a period. Now I'm doing this. And most of us now are going to have 11 different jobs.
Yep.
We're going to and I'm not done yet.
Yep.
Not done yet.
Yep.
And that's the interesting thing. Even when we think about the pandemic, it made remote work normal.
Yeah.
You know, before, if you had asked, could you work from home or could you work from Costa Rica or whatever, would have been, you know,
A thing.
absolutely not, right?
Right.
And so there are more options. And especially because workplace ageism is a real thing. That's
Mhm.
not like a
Mhm.
pretend thing. And I don't even apply for like regular jobs. I'm more in the what creative project can we do together that you're, you know, doing something that is in the area of interest that I love and you're passionate about it. I think more like that. 70 is for kind of the 9 to 5 world. It's just too big a number.
Mm.
That is uh, not just. I don't know anyone who on that like 9 to 5 is sort of on Indeed trying to work that. No,
Right.
no.
Right. Right. Well, the perfect note to end on is everyday joy because um, you've jumped into the aging and longevity market full time. I mean, you have totally reinvented yourself. There we go. Where do you find the everyday joy in the work that you're doing?
So for me, it is around not having to be perfect. I was that generation where everything had to be. I did a dinner party recently. I decided at midnight to do it. A young friend of mine was here from Miami. He's 30. I decided I want a bunch of people to meet him. I didn't have to make the chicken. I went out and bought it. I already
Mm.
had the flowers. Okay. And I love a big bouquet. Half the flowers are fake, half are real. They go together. It's a voluptuous bouquet. I always have wine. I sent out
Mm,
a text. It wasn't some curated invite. They all
mm,
came. I was pushing them out the door the next night at noon.
mm.
And so the real flex now is interdependence.
Yeah.
We're taught to be independent, and
Ooh.
that's the priority, and you're on your own, and everybody needs their own snow blower and their own
Hmm.
Wi-Fi. The real flex as you get older is your community, who you're connecting with, investing in them. That is the joy for me.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you
This went
so
so
much for
fast.
taking the time. It does go so fast. Oh, we could keep going. But thank you for everybody who's watched, and thank you so much for all the beautiful work that you do.
Thank you.
Take care.